So everyone needs a survival guide, especially in sales. And I'm happy to today to have on the Sales Strategist podcast one of my favorite sales trainers, consultants, but especially one of my favorite authors, David Brock. Hi, David.
Hi, it's so good to have you be invited to this. I'm really excited for our conversation. Thank you.
My pleasure. So, as I said at the beginning, everyone needs a survival guide, and David, you wrote a survival guide for all the sales managers out there. And honestly, let me start with this. I'm not a sales manager, so I don't manage people, but I use your book to manage my managers.
Well, thank you. I'm flattered. And stay tuned. So this fall you'll see the Sales Executive Survival Guide come out. So you'll learn how to manage your manager's managers.
Oh, that was my last question, but now let me
Yeah.
jump on this. When will this be out?
It looks like it's probably around October, possibly November.
Oh, that's a good one. Oh, thanks. Like, because I was trying to put you in the spot at the end of this podcast by asking you a second book, but I'm happy that you anticipated me. So,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, see, once you get your manager under control, you have to start working on your manager's managers.
this is something we can talk even like, but not right now. Okay,
Good.
maybe when we're not recording. So,
Good.
David, like as I told you, I'm so happy to have you here. Like, you're one of my favorite authors out there, and if it's okay for you, let's briefly introduce yourself, like a
hmm
brief introduction about you, your experience for those who don't know you yet.
Oh, super. Well, thank you. I'm Dave Brock. As you've said, I'm the author of the Sales Manager Survival Guide and the upcoming Sales Executive Survival Guide. And I'm CEO of a boutique consulting company called Partners in Excellence. And we have about 15 people, kind of similar to my profile, around the world, nine in the US, two in Asia, and the rest in Europe. And by background, I kind of started my sales career. I came into sales in an unusual way. I was studying to be a theoretical physicist and was going to teach and do research at the university. And it was, typical Silicon Valley story. I met this inventor while I was skiing, and we started talking about his invention. And he called me up one day and said, "How'd you like to be my VP of engineering and product development?" And I'm a 21-year-old kid, and to say, "Wow, this is really cool." And we did it, and we failed miserably. And I realized there was a lot more to being successful in business than having a hot product. And so I started studying business and that kind of thing, and ended up going to work for IBM in New York City, selling mainframe computers to banks and those kinds of things. Later went up the food chain, managed a division in IBM, and did a lot of work in kind of developing new businesses for IBM. And then left IBM in the late 80s, early 90s to do some turnarounds, either as EVP of sales or as CEO of technology companies. And along the way, I founded or co-founded. I was part of the, I guess, founding team of Deso Systems, and then I've founded a couple of other software companies. One I sold to Deso a number of years ago. Another couple failed miserably, and a couple more are kind of stumbling along, and hopefully we'll get success from them.
Thank you. I have one question. The first one is related to your background because, as you told me, you studied physics, which is really exact. Let's put it in this way. When you have to really nail it down to the right exact number. But what made you become interested in sales, which is probably the opposite because the value is in the variable. So how the behaviors change.
And see, that's really an interesting perspective. Is I think what I like about physics and sales is you're really addressing complex problems. Um, And if you look at physics, kind of even at the nuclear level, there's a lot of variability, a lot of unpredictability, uh, and all. But it's different in sales. Is there's a lot that, and that's the challenge and the excitement of it is you're dealing with infinite variability, and so you have to be constantly figuring it out and adapting yourself. And it's that challenge of, how do I produce results, how do I achieve what I'm trying to achieve in this constantly changing world. And so, part of the thing I think has been so helpful in my career is kind of the discipline and the way you think as a physicist or engineer or whatever kind of background you've had. If you leverage those tools and processes in selling, is it helps you, one, better understand the customer. As a scientist, you have to have kind of an impartial view. If you walk in saying, I'm going to make it come out the way I want to come out, you'll fail. And you have to kind of look and say, how does the experiment work? What do we learn from it? And how do we start repeating it? And so, you bring those skills in as in working at any level of sales, and it causes you to think differently. It causes you, I think, to take more of a customer perspective than you might otherwise, because you have to be open to various different perspectives.
Got it. And why sales training?
Well, it's actually our consulting company is more of a business strategy, um, go to market strategy type company. So we help very, very large organizations figure out, how do we reach the next step in our growth? Or in some cases that we do a lot of turnarounds, how do we, we're not succeeding, how do we turn ourselves around and go? So there are a whole bunch of issues around strategy, around people, around organization, and all that kind of thing. But what we do differently is rather than just saying, here's what you should do, we help people with the change management and the implementation. So in the change management, there's always skills development. So what we do is we develop the training programs, we deliver the training programs, or we have our clients, we train our clients in how to deliver those. And as you know from reading the book, managers, how to coach and reinforce those so you keep going. And also, it's last year we trained. This sounds more impressive than it really is, but we trained about 125,000 people, and um, and it's all a result of kind of more consulting projects that we have where people are trying to implement the change, and then so we have to help our clients give their people the skills to do that. And the 120 people shouldn't be so impressed with that. It wasn't that we were in work class. Well, with COVID, we couldn't be in classrooms every day, but the majority of that is done through e-learning and virtual training.
Got it. And I have another question related to this. Like in this new age we're living, the post-pandemic one,
Mhm.
where do you see the main areas of opportunities for the big companies you work with? Like, let's see the main three big areas of opportunity.
Well, see, and I'll step back and reframe it a little bit. We went through the pandemic, and that kind of changed how we look at things. Now we're potentially entering an economic recession, which people are struggling with and looking at, anyway. But what I see is all the things that are happening in selling are things that a lot of people were talking about 3, 4, 5 years ago. And we were saying, this is the way buying is going. And as a result, this is the way selling is going. I think what's happened with the pandemic is it created a crisis point that accelerated the changes. So some of the changes that I saw happening, I said they'll happen in 5, 10 years. They're now happening now, and they're accelerated. And I think in as you look at any recession, I've lived through a couple of recessions, is that what you see is they don't necessarily drive fundamental changes, but they almost drive a back to basics, a real strong focus. And what I wrote an article the other day about this is the people that are really, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And what I've noticed is the people that are really good at selling in normal times, that they know how to create value, they know how to help guide the customer, they know how to focus on business problems, not pitching their products, and they know how to do that. That's what they do in normal times. And in tough times, that's what's most important to the customer. And so they don't do anything different, maybe just sharpen their focus, but it's because they're doing those things. And it's everybody else that walks in and pitches their product, doesn't understand the customer, is more focused on closing the deal rather than solving the problem. Is those people struggle because what the customer cares about is solving the problem. So what we see is a lot of those things. So going back, some of the trends that we see, and it's not so much me, I see it, but it is a lot of the research you see, is kind of the shift to digital buying. It's interesting that 60% of customers today prefer a rep-free buying experience. And they're looking at how do we engage digitally and so on and so forth. So, and I think that's a real opportunity for sales, because it says we get involved. If we do this right, we get involved in the most important, difficult part of their buying process. And the easier parts, the communicating, here are the features, functions, feeds, and speeds of our products, here are the testimonials, and so on and so forth. But salespeople will come in at points in time of the buying cycle as interventions, and it's really around, what does it mean to me? What does it mean to my organization? Translate it from what I'm seeing through social media or digital or whatever, to specifically what it means to me. And so I think when I look at that, that's what causes me to be so excited about sales. We go back to my discussion about physics. Is what you see is it's this really complex problem solving with high variability. And it's almost like a puzzle. How do you put this together and really help the customer? And now we get, in some sense, we get freed up. I don't have to spend a lot of time talking about product. Is I get to talk about you, what you want to achieve, and what your problems are. And isn't that the coolest thing in the world?
Absolutely. And I think it also helps in, speeding up a sales rep, because it's way easier to understand
Yep.
how to talk about a person, problems, and the business than to learn complex solutions, maybe like
Well,
technical
and,
IT or
and
whatever they are.
there are a lot of people in our organization that know how to do that, so we can leverage them. And there's a lot of stuff that, if we can do it digitally. Last night I had dinner with an executive from Amazon, and we were talking about what they're doing in AWS and so on and so forth. And it was there's so much that the customers can learn digitally. Let them learn through that most effective channel, but there's the stuff that they'll never be able to learn, and that's where the salesperson comes in. So I look at it, and this is, in my career, is probably the most exciting time to be in selling.
Despite the recession. No, I agree, and
The
I totally
recession
agree
is,
with you.
for the people that really know how to do this, they're going to thrive through it. And what's interesting is you see those people. It's actually, you see what happens. We've done analysis. You see the growth rates of their companies are really high through the recession. Then as you come out of the recession, it's a rising tide floats all boats. So So you see what happens is in those high performing companies, their growth rate will slow down a little bit as others come up. But during this time period, the the a number one sellers, the people who really get how to engage customers, they're going to thrive.
So fingers crossed for for us. I just want to come back for one last question on your book because when I read it for the first time, I asked myself, why is this one of the few most compelling sales management books around? Like, why do you think there is such a shortage of a complete book like the one you wrote?
Well, I think it's changing from when I wrote the book. I published the book, I think, in 2016 or so. At that time, a good friend of mine did a lot of market analysis on training in selling. And at that time, we were kind of globally spending, and I may not have the numbers exactly correct, but the order of magnitude is important, is we were spending about $4 to $5 billion a year in training salespeople. And if you looked at the amount of money we were spending in training sales managers, it was about 200 million a year. And as you see in the book, I actually think the frontline sales manager is the most difficult and most important job in selling, because their job is to maximize the performance of each one of their people. Um, and so nothing was being done for them. And I met so many managers who had great potential, but they didn't have any time. They didn't have any coaching from their management. They didn't have any tools. They didn't know how to do their job. So that's why I wrote the book and wrote it in the style that I did. If you fast forward to today, it's getting better. It's not where it should be, but you see a whole number of software tools focusing on helping the sales manager and helping them, with understanding the data and leveraging data for performance. You see more books coming out around sales management. So we're going in the right direction. But still, if I look at the proportion of investment in and you look at it, and you can get a little cynical about it. If I'm a sales training company or a consultant that focuses on training or something like that, I'm going to go where the money is. Well, I'll go to the salespeople, because the population of the salespeople is so much greater than the managers. And so you understand that. I don't know that I agree with that, but you understand that.
I understand. I totally understand. And let's step a little bit back and
Hmm.
to you told us that you have a company which is Partners in Excellence, which is also the name of your website. And
Hmm.
in 2019, when I was a BDR, and I was already following you since a couple of years, I was a little bit struggling in my conversation. Like, let me put it in this way: they were going okay, they were going well, but
Hmm.
I was not delivering what the company was asking me to do. So to have these
Hmm.
massive changing conversation with a potential buyer who was maybe a CEO, CIO, or whatever.
Hmm.
So I read one of your articles and titled "My 500K SDRs," and then I said, okay, maybe I can be rich if I work for David. But then I start reading it, and that is, I think, the most like important concept of I've read about SDRs in the last 3 years. If you want to
Hmm.
tell us something more about my 500K SDRs.
Well, yeah. So I mean, that article came out of a speech I gave that was relatively controversial at the University of Texas at Dallas. Just as a side note, after that speech, I had a whole bunch of SDR managers come up to me saying, "We can't pay SDRs 500K," and then I had a whole bunch of SDRs coming up to me saying, "Can I apply for a job?" Uh, but uh, but anyway, so if you look at the SDR, and in many times, I actually think the SDR is the most difficult job in selling, because you have to reach out to people that, and I'll put inbound to the side for a moment, but you have to reach out to people who don't necessarily want to talk to you, who don't necessarily understand that they have a problem. And you have to engage them, um, and engage them and get them interested in saying, tell me more. That's the SDR's goal, is to get to that tell me more. And I think so it's the hardest job in selling. And typically what we've done is we've taken our most inexperienced people and put them in the most difficult job in selling. Um, and and so we have, you and I were talking earlier, is when you first came in as a BDR, you were supposed to contact these C-level executives. And you look at, one is you were probably trained about your product. Two is you're relatively inexperienced, and now you're supposed to talk to these people who are C-level, who've been 10, 20 years in their job, who are experts about the job. How do you have a conversation with them? So I think we set our SDRs up for failure. If I go back to my 500K SDRs, at one time I managed a business unit. It was at IBM, and we were bringing some new products to markets and some new technologies, really around engineering and engineering design and that kind of thing. And we needed to engage top executives in thinking about their businesses differently. And so, for instance, I think back at a time where we were meeting with the CEO of one of the largest airplane manufacturers in the world. And if I had sent an SDR, no offense to you, if I had sent you in to do that, you never would have even gotten a response. But my SDR was had managed an engineering team of several hundred people. He had done made multi-billion-dollar projects and things like that. He knew what the job was. He knew how to leverage the technology. He had a person working with him who understood manufacturing. He managed one of IBM's biggest manufacturing plants. So these are guys that were really credible in understanding business and the problem. And I had them on my team, and I was paying them $500,000 each because I needed them to reach the president of this aircraft manufacturer, or the chief engineer of Daimler, uh, or I should, since here in Italy, I said the chief engineer of Ferrari, and talk to them about changing their businesses and changing their business models. And those executives wanted to talk to us because they had people who were almost their level, who understood the problems and could really help them. And so I think what we do is we set a mismatch of, what do our customers want to talk about, and how do we get the right people talking to them in those very first conversations. And so, one of the things that I've always thought of is maybe really good account executives, maybe really good salespeople, senior salespeople, maybe their next job should be becoming an SDR, because they now hopefully have the knowledge, the skill level, the experience of engaging customers and talking about their businesses, that those are the people I want making the very first calls on those executives, because they can engage them. And no fault to a young person new to selling, is they don't have that experience and we're being unfair to them. So I think as we look at the SDR model, I think we set too many of them up for failure. I think, we have this common cookie cutter thing. Entry level jobs in sales are SDR, BDRs, and so on and so forth. We bring them in. We expect them to do the most difficult thing in the world, and so on. So, and I think, we don't have to have all SDRs at 500K or whatever it is. And although I'm sure a lot of the people listening to this will be applauding, say, yes, we do. Yes, we do. But what we need to do is we need to match the talent with the customer we're going after. So there's a lot of stuff that we sell that's very transactional, that's easier to understand, where we don't need to sell at a senior executive level. there I think entry level people can do very, very well. As we look at these more complex solutions where we have to engage the top executives, we should get much more experienced people. So we should have a scaling of SDRs where we take people new to the business, match them up with the right kind of target customers, and people very experienced in the business, who've sold major deals, and have them as SDRs and match them up with the right customers.
Thank you for the like really detailed answer. And about that article, talking about that article, what I really noticed at that time was that first you were one of the few people who understood that SDR was a marketing job. Like
Mm-hmm.
everyone was was like, and you were kind of talking about how big is this dissonance between how we train SDRs, so we teach them all the marketing collaterals we have,
Yeah.
and what we ask them to do, which is a sales conversation. So this is where I said, wow. And then plus you flipped it. So you flipped the script we had so far. So from 2011 up to, I don't know, 2019, when you wrote that article, everyone
Mm-hmm.
was talking about the same SDR model
Right.
ever and ever and ever. And then when you came with that thing and you flipped it, everyone started talking about the evangelist in the company.
Yeah.
And they started hiring these senior people to do these massive, speaking conferences, or even
Mm-hmm.
conversation which led to something. So then I have also related to this another one question for you, which is now we're all talking about account-based marketing. We are in the ABM world.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put it in this big way. And now marketing owns, let's say, the biggest part of the prospecting funnel. Let's put it in this way. But
Mm-hmm.
why are we still paying SDR in a lead-based way? Like we ask them to do account-based marketing, so have multiple touch points inside
Mm-hmm.
the prospecting company, but we pay them for the opportunity created on one user who could maybe use the solution. So why do you think is so?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know why we do that. I, again, being a little bit crass, is I think what we have is people who just aren't thinking deeply about what is this job? What am I trying to do? How do we measure and compensate them correctly? What's the influence that they have, not just on the one transaction, but on setting up for kind of growth and future transactions? So I think we in the press of everyday business is we just do what we've always done before and tweak it and so on, rather than really rethink how we do this thing. And I think, again, you look at you know as I look at kind of the way business is going right now, and again, what's exciting to me is the biggest opportunity we have is to incite people to search. Because if you look at, people have this digital buying journey. Salespeople and SDRs, BDRs will get involved at certain parts of it. But how do we start them even thinking about that? And it actually starts with search. I used to say incite people to change, and that would be the conversation we might have with an executive, where, for instance, my people were talking to the CEO of an airplane company, or the CEO of an automobile company or whatever, and inciting them to change. Now, the issue with digital tools is, how do we incite somebody to search? Because once they start searching, they're going to start thinking about changing. So we have to get earlier in the process, which is kind of a marketing thing. But it's if a person doesn't know they need to search, how are they going to catch their attention? If a person doesn't, it's I a few months ago, I was at a trip in Southern California, and as I was driving down to from the airport to see the client, I happened to see a billboard that I knew on that billboard was something that would be very important to that client because of the discussions we were having. And We got down, Tim, we went through the discussions and so on, and we started. Part of what I was doing was inciting the guy to think differently, inciting him to search, and so on. I didn't say a thing about the billboard. The next day, he called me up. He said, "Dave, as I was driving to work, I saw this billboard." He had driven by that every single day, and it just never sunk in. But now he had this idea in his mind. All of a sudden, he started seeing things that were relevant. And so that's the problem we have with our marketing is our customers, even though it flashes up on LinkedIn or it flashes up in search or something like that, if they don't know they should be looking at it, they aren't going to pay attention to it, even if it shows up on their page. And so now we have to say, how do we take that customer who doesn't even know they should be thinking differently and get them to start thinking differently? And I right now, one is I'm having some discussions. How do we do that digitally? I don't have the answers to that yet, but I do know that if you get influencers or if you get experts from your own company and you run conferences, or you somehow get them on, maybe even interviews like this or something like that, somebody will listen to it and say, hey, I don't agree with this guy, but let me try and understand it a little bit more. It's kind of like your journey is you heard me say something, um, and whether you agree or not with me, it started you studying and starting you learn and having a different point of view.
Yeah, this reinforces even what you wrote in 2019. So let's imagine like three big BDRs per company, four big BDRs driving these conversations constantly inside companies as kind of advocates.
Exactly, exactly. And in fact, I mean, you mentioned it earlier. Is if I can get a small number of those type of people to incite the customer to start doing things differently, actually, from a sales point of view, I don't need that level of skill. Is now they're thinking about it. Now they're asking the questions. So I just need salespeople that can help them answer those questions and move forward. But it's that thing of how do I get a person to think differently, which is the toughest challenge, which is what we try and get SDRs to do every day. And it's no fault of the SDR. It's the wrong thing.
What really like it's crazy about the model we have now is that we ask, like I always have this metaphor of a classroom, okay? So
Mm-hmm.
we in the classroom we have one teacher and 25 like students, okay?
Yeah,
In companies we have 25 SDRs and one C-level they have to call in. Let's put it in this
yeah,
way. So we kind of flip the classroom model. Like in the model
yeah.
you teach and you talk about, you have three, four teachers who can teach to like C levels. But when we flip it, we have more teachers than students. If we ask our young SDRs to teach
Mm-hmm.
something to C levels, which is really crazy. But the big issue I think we have now is that this SDR model is also used to, entry level jobs. So people start in SDR and then they move in marketing operations, they go in customer success, they go in A. Let's say that we get rid of the job. Okay. Let's say that by tomorrow we will get rid of the SDR function as it is today. What do you think will happen to all the new and junior people who enter in a company and don't have clear ideas about what to do in their life?
Well, I think, I mean, we've been there, done that. Selling has existed for millennia. Um, and when I entered, I was just like you. I came out of school. Uh, I was supposed to call on senior level banking executives in New York City, which is probably one of the toughest things in the world. Um, and what I did is they put me on a team and they put me with special assignments and they gave me a lot of support. They gave me experts that I could draw on. So, a lot of times it was less what I was doing, but more who I brought with me. Um, and I remember like one of my very first sales was it was in the old days where to get your credit card approved if you're in a store and you're putting your credit card rather than putting it in a machine and it was approved. The people in the store had to call up the credit card center and get approval. So you go into the credit card center and there were literally hundreds or thousands of people sitting at PCs, looking up, has Dave paid his credit card recently and can we approve this transaction? Um, and I started noticing it. So I went to an expert in IBM. He was in IBM research. I said, what can you tell me about this process? And he says, oh, this is really interesting. He says, every tenth of a second it slows down because of load on the computer, is productivity goes down by a full second. And so if you look at the number of transactions they do in a day across hundreds or thousands of people, it's a huge business problem. So I brought this guy in. I didn't, to the EVP, and the EVP just didn't, care about me because I was this young, inexperienced kid. But I brought this guy in, and he was an expert. And he said, show me this data for your operators. And the EVP showed it to him. He says, here's the impact that it's having on your business. And so I was able to bring those experts in with me, and at the same time I was learning, so I could continue the conversations. And and the end result of that was um, uh, we got a $60 million order for a new system to upgrade and improve that productivity, and it wasn't budgeted. But the business case was so strong that they said we can't afford not to do that. So I think it's how we set up entry level people, one, to be curious and learn, and how we get them the resources to support them. So I kept leveraging experts or people who knew more than me, or I had some mentors who were more senior salespeople, and I'd say, "Can you help me with this sales call? Can you help me with this conversation?" And that was part of the culture of our business. So while I was a young guy alone responsible for a certain territory, I had the support of my managers, the support of my peers, access to experts, and I was trained. This is the way you think. You don't do it by yourself, but you figure out who you need to help you do that. And then as I got more experience, I could do more and more of those initial conversations myself. So I think we need to look at how we create success, not just this quarter or this year, but how do we create success over a longer period of time and how we develop our people. I was reading something, in the evenings, you know, after I've had dinner and I'm trying to, I'm just kind of winding down. I probably waste my time scrolling through LinkedIn, and I was reading these articles about SDRs who were overachieving their quotas, but they weren't achieving their daily call volumes, and they were put on performance improvement plans. And I looked at that and I said, here are people that have a lot of potential, but we have the wrong business model. We're measuring them on the wrong things. And where, I look at, if I worked with that person differently, I could develop that person into being a huge contributor to the organization, but we just don't understand that. And that's management's fault.
Question is, why are we going back to these, activity equal performance mindset? Like in the last 4 years, I don't know. It's probably due to some of the technology we buy. I'm in the SaaS
Yeah.
industry, so
Yeah.
I'm pretty familiar with it. But I think that we are using the tools in the wrong way, which are bringing us back to 15 years ago. Like, why
Yeah.
why is this happening? Like, it's
If I had the answer to that, I'd write a book, I'd be speaking, and I'd be, ultimately sitting on a beach in the south of Italy, drinking Chianti and having great food. But uh, it is, I don't know. I there's there's This sounds terrible, and it is terrible. Is I think we're committed to mediocrity rather than committed to excellence. And it's interesting because most companies get upset and don't want to talk to me because I say those things. But the companies that want to hear about this are the high performers, and they want to say, how do we get better and improve? But and it's no one person's fault. I think we look at just kind of a general trend in society, a trend of we're not as interested in our jobs. We're not as interested, and it's not a work-life balance kind of thing. But I think we tend to go through the motions rather than being really thoughtful. And we think we're being efficient. I think there's a lot of this kind of mechanistic approach that says, how do we be efficient? So, if I can have one person make 50 calls a day, and I introduce a technology now that person can make 100 calls a day, is we think that we're making them much more efficient, but we aren't looking at effectiveness and impact and those kinds of things. So I think again, and I can't point to say it's the CROs, it's bad CROs or it's bad CMOs or it's things like that. I think we kind of get in this kind of reinforcing loop where everybody's doing the same thing, and it takes tremendous courage for somebody to break away and say, let me look at this differently. But it's those people that say, let me look at this differently, that are making the real breakthroughs.
I totally agree, and I think that it's also contributing the fact that the job tenure is kind of shrinking. So we have managers who just stay for just a short amount of time inside the company, and I think it's easier to show some numbers, even if they are fake, like
But
number of activities and stuff like this, to show an impact that you did something in just a short amount of time.
But think about that. What it really means to a business is, so we see the data right now. We see the data average tenure of a salesperson and average tenure of a sales manager is 11 months. So let me take a fairly simple SaaS product. And I say, well, my onboarding is probably 3 months. And then, I have to start building a pipeline. So that may take me a few months. And then my sales cycle is maybe 3 months or something like that. And you start adding this all up and you say, as they're starting to get ramping up and really productive, and we see the results of what's happened, they've gone off to someplace else. Or a manager's the same thing. Is a manager comes in, you've seen in the book, I said, well, take your first 90 days to do this and then start to, and by the time you implement the change process, you go. So what happens is this short tenure is creates a real business problem, because you look at the opportunity cost. How much our customers aren't stopping buying? They're not buying from us because they don't have the right people presenting to them. And so the opportunity cost to our businesses is literally billions of dollars of business that we're losing. And so you start now asking, um, why is tenure so short? And I have a lot of people saying, well, it's Gen Zs. Gen Zs don't want to work at someplace anytime. Yeah, I speak to hundreds of Gen Zs every year, and they don't say that. They say they want to work at a place where they're challenged, where they have a position to grow, where they feel heard, where they can learn and develop. And as long as the place is doing that for them, they're going to stay there. The problem is we create these organizations that don't do this. And that's why they move from position to position to position. So I think, and what you'll see in the new book, the real crisis we have in organizations and in selling is we aren't creating places where people want to work, where they feel value, where they can feel they can grow and develop and contribute. And if you look at that just from a strict business point of view of saying, I need to create that because I want to capture billions and billions and billions in revenue and grow my company like crazy. And so if I don't create a workspace that values people, that listens to them, that considers different ideas, that cares about the people, that develops them, not for what are you doing for me this week, this month, this quarter, but I care about that. But I also care about what can you do for me next year, in 2 years, in 3 years? How can I grow you and how can I contribute? How can I take somebody like you who's really talented and say, just because you didn't make your dials this week, I'm going to put you in a performance plan. I want to say, you're really talented. How do I help you with your current challenge? And then how do I grow you into taking more levels, higher levels of responsibility so you can make more money for me?
Got it. So no, thank you for the answer. Like I know we are running short of time. Like we're almost there. And in terms of books, you answered me already. October 2022, Sales Executive Survival Guide will be out. I will buy it, as I've done with with the first.
For you, I'll send you a copy, an
Oh,
autographed copy for free. So,
that would be great. Trust me. Like if you can send me also another autograph, so I put it in this one,
okay.
so that would be great. So thank you so much. Like I have one question because I'd like to know what is the biggest business or sales issue you're working on now in one of your customers?
Um, I think it's really this last issue that we talked about. And if you look at a lot of organizations don't want to hear what I have to say. Most of the organizations that I work with are the people that already believe that. And so they're saying, Dave, how do we do this? And what they're doing, we saw this kind of midway through the pandemic, we saw those organizations saying, we're in a position where we can take share away from our competitors, where we can grow wildly. And they had this culture and attitude. So now it's saying, how do we get this whole group together? So it's really where I spend my time right now is taking high performers and making them bigger and better than they are, and taking share away from everybody else. And frankly, this sounds bad, destroying bad companies. I don't care about destroying bad companies. Because I'm doing their people a favor, I'm doing their customers a favor, and so on and so forth. What I do is, and some of this is the evangelism, is my personal goal is how do I make a dent, maybe a small dent in the world of how we think about our people, how we think about our customers. So the degree I could take, say, maybe the top 15% of the organizations in the world that really get this and want me to do this. My goal is how do I expand that to 20 or 22%? How do I get some people that are maybe wanting to do that, but don't know how to do that?
Or maybe that have this kind of latent thought
Yeah,
in their mind.
yeah,
Like I had this latent thing, which which was telling me something is not good, but it's not your fault. And then
yeah,
your articles came in, and then I got into it, you know. So
yeah.
yeah.
Well, and I think, I believe in the goodness of people. I believe in people wanting to contribute, wanting to grow and learn. I think we're put in environments that, through maybe no maliciousness, but they're set up to fail. And so so there's a lot of people that really want to do this. And how do we create communities of people that want to do this and help them grow and learn? Um, how do we create companies that are interested in this idea but don't know how to do this? How do we help them move forward and become, rather than 15% great companies, we have 20, 25% great companies, and so on. And we create in that, you see a snowball effect. And what you do is we always will have the normal curve, the bell curve. But what I want to do is I want to shift that bell curve from here to here. And then how does somebody like you after me shift the bell curve from here to here?
Makes sense. So, David, I think that I learned a lot, and for today it's enough. So no, but thank you so much, really, for being here. And I really enjoyed the talk because more than a podcast, it was kind of me asking some clarifications about what I learned in these 2 years, and I really love this approach. And I'm sure that all the people that will listen to this, whatever they will be, they will learn a lot, or they will become more familiar with these evangelist approach that you're talking about since 4 years ago now. So really, I'm really looking forward for the new book at this point
Okay.
now.
Well, one is I have to thank you. One is for somebody like you to invite me to talk to you is just such a privilege, and it also gives me such great confidence in the future of this profession because I just love selling. And when I see younger people like you coming in and being really thoughtful about what we do, is anything I can do to help you evangelize, and so on and so forth, is it gives me faith that we will get better. And so it is truly an honor and such a privilege. And I really appreciate you reaching out and inviting me.
And I'm sure that I will knock at your door again in the next time as soon as you write
You're
something
welcome.
else.
You're welcome to. At some point, I'll just give you the code for the door, and you can just come in and grab a cup of coffee and sit down.
Fly over over California just to have a coffee with you and then come back to Italy. By the way, thank you so much for being here, David, and I'm looking forward to talk with you again.
Thank you.
Bye.